I could never have foreseen that one simple act of kindness would forever alter my perception of who I truly was. Yet that's precisely what unfolded on the day Clara requested my assistance with her annual spring tidying. Clara had consistently stood out from everyone in my circle, possessing an air of sophistication and authority that compelled all around her to pause and pay attention whenever she voiced her thoughts. Even though she was the elder sibling of my good friend, I consistently experienced a tense excitement every time her gaze met mine directly. It happened to be a drizzly Saturday midday when her call came through, her tone silky and assured over the line. "I'm searching for someone capable of managing some minor tasks in the home," she remarked with a hint of playfulness. "You happen to be available, correct?" I consented immediately without giving it much consideration. It wasn't out of the ordinary for Clara to enlist others into her schemes. However, what caught me off guard was that this specific assistance would propel me into a realm I had never even contemplated exploring for my own life. Upon my arrival, her residence remained as spotless as always. The gentle aroma of waxed timber and newly bloomed blossoms permeated the atmosphere as I entered, brushing off the light rain from my coat. Clara welcomed me with a grin that held a touch of enigma, her deep eyes twinkling as though she possessed knowledge hidden from me. "You've arrived at the perfect moment," she stated, guiding me into the spacious sitting area where cartons filled with ornaments and vintage garments lay dispersed over the ground. "I'm rearranging it all. I could benefit from another set of hands." Initially, the tasks were entirely routine. I organized the cartons, piled up volumes, and transported aged pieces of furniture to the storage space while Clara glided elegantly throughout the area, issuing directives with subtle command. Nevertheless, an atmosphere of whimsical vibe lingered, as though she anticipated the ideal instant to disclose a hidden truth. From time to time I noticed her observing me with that perceptive grin, which triggered an odd chill within me. Following a few hours, she halted, sweeping a lock of hair away from her countenance. "You've proven to be an exceptional assistant," she commented casually. "However, there's one additional task I'd appreciate your help with." She vanished into a separate chamber and reappeared, clutching a tidily arranged parcel of material. Initially, I assumed it was merely another collection of drapes or linens, but as she spread it out over the couch, my respiration halted. It constituted a uniform for a housemaid, inclusive of a ruffled bib and intricate lace edging. The ebony and ivory textile shimmered faintly beneath the illumination, with every element exact and intentional. I gazed at it, my thoughts racing to find any response. Clara inclined her head, a modest, impish grin dancing upon her mouth. "I require someone to demonstrate this for me," she clarified serenely. "I'm contemplating it for a specialized gathering, and I need to observe its appearance on a real individual." I muttered something regarding not fitting properly or lacking knowledge on how, but she dismissed my objections with an elegant wave of her palm. "You're ideal," she asserted decisively. "Moreover, it's merely for a brief period. Indulge me." There existed a poise in her speech that rendered disagreement impossible. My pulse quickened as I accepted the attire from her, the sleek material chilly against my digits. I convinced myself it was simply an innocuous prank, a swift courtesy for an acquaintance. Yet deep within, an unusual exhilaration awakened, a murmur of intrigue I found impossible to hush completely. Clara directed me toward the visitors' sleeping quarters with a tender nudge, shutting the entrance after me as I remained immobile, gripping the uniform in my grasp. The space carried a subtle fragrance of lavender, the gentle radiance from the pane casting a cozy luminescence over the surfaces. I examined my image in the looking-glass, my mirrored self gazing back with a blend of doubt and an emotion I couldn't identify. Gradually, nearly in defiance of my own desires, I started to transform. As I pulled the gown over my crown, the textile embraced my form in manners I hadn't anticipated. The bib secured tidily around the midsection, the lace grazing lightly against my epidermis. Every component I fine-tuned appeared to immerse me further into an existence I hadn't realized I desired. My palms shook as I secured the final clasp, but upon finally glancing upward, I scarcely identified the individual returning my stare. The reflection displayed someone gentler, more refined, a facet of myself I had never permitted to emerge. The somber gown stood in stark opposition to the light lace, accentuating a silhouette that appeared both alien and oddly inherent. My inhalation paused as I pivoted slightly, observing the hem flutter with every shift. It transcended mere disguise. It resembled a subdued epiphany. Prior to my complete comprehension of the instant, Clara rapped softly and stepped in without awaiting permission. Her gaze expanded marginally as she absorbed the view of me. For a split second, a quietude so profound enveloped us that I could perceive the thumping of my pulse. Then she beamed. Not the bantering expression from earlier, but something more affectionate, nearly admiring. "Exquisite," she murmured tenderly. "I was certain it would compliment you." The manner in which she expressed it caused my face to redden. I attempted to dismiss it with laughter, to craft a quip, but the phrases lodged in my windpipe. Clara approached nearer, her scrutiny dwelling on the tidy knot of the bib, the fine detailing of the cuffs. "You carry it as though it were crafted specifically for you," she breathed. "Does it seem odd or does it seem appropriate?" Her inquiry lingered in the atmosphere like both a dare and a summons simultaneously. I lacked a reply. Not at that point. But in that particular juncture, an element within me transformed, understated yet irrefutable, akin to the initial quiver of a tempest on the distant skyline. Clara's statements resonated in my hearing well after she retreated, her eyes remaining locked on me with that inscrutable combination of inquisitiveness and subdued endorsement. I yearned to respond to her inquiry, to inform her if it seemed odd or appropriate. However, my speech declined to function. Rather, I remained stationary in quietude, grasping the border of the bib like an anchor while my heart pounded so vehemently I was convinced she could detect it. Clara's grin intensified, not through derision, but through a form of tolerant comprehension, as though she had witnessed this response previously and understood precisely what transpired inside me. "You needn't utter a word," she stated kindly. "Occasionally it's preferable to simply experience it." She orbited me leisurely, her footwear tapping faintly against the timber flooring. I sensed each instant of her examination, the manner her look dwelled on the pleats of the hem, the refined contour of lace beside the neckline. It wasn't critical. If anything, it was nearly creative, as if she were appreciating a canvas she had meticulously animated. "It's astonishing how attire can transform our self-perception," she pondered, her tone reflective. "A solitary piece can unlock an entrance you weren't aware existed." Her statements dispatched a tremor through me. Was that the essence of this, an entrance? Yes, what resided beyond it? When she ultimately ceased before me, Clara extended her hand and smoothed a minor crease on the bib. The basic contact caused me to recoil, not from dread, but from the shocking realization of how authentic this entire situation felt. "I believe we ought to complete the ensemble," she declared, her gaze shining with subdued thrill. Before I could inquire about her intention, she vanished into the connected lavatory and came back with a compact cosmetics kit and a pair of ebony hosiery neatly draped across her limb. My breathing halted once more. "Calm yourself," she instructed, interpreting my countenance immediately. "Nothing drastic, merely a touch of refinement to align with the attire." I could have declined. I ought to have declined, but an element inside me yearned for the subsequent phase. An odd blend of apprehension and eagerness that rendered me incapable of opposition. I inclined my head almost undetectably, and that sufficed as consent for Clara. She led me to the dressing table and softly urged me onto the padded seat. The looking glass mirrored an anxious silhouette in a housemaid's uniform, eyes broad and hesitant. And positioned behind that silhouette stood Clara, composed and self-assured like a creator ready to apply the concluding touches to a work of art. The procedure commenced delicately, nearly comfortingly. Clara swept a faint base across my visage, the chilly sensation of the pad soothing the agitated vigor humming under my surface. Following that arrived an understated coat of rouge, a refined rose hue that enlivened my cheeks without rendering me resembling someone masked, just accentuating what's inherently present, she clarified with a comforting beam. As Clara delicately swept a whisper of shimmering powder across my eyelids, I glanced toward the mirror and felt a sharp, unexpected shock ripple through me. The face gazing back was still mine, unmistakably so, yet somehow gentler, more polished, as though a secret edition of myself had been patiently waiting beneath the surface for this exact moment of gentle revelation. When the makeup was complete, Clara lowered herself with effortless grace to her knees and guided my feet into the sheer black stockings. The silk slid upward over my skin like cool water, hugging my legs with just enough gentle pressure to accentuate their lines. A small, involuntary gasp escaped me at the novel sensation. Clara looked up, her eyes warm with understanding, and offered a knowing smile. Different, isn't it? But beautiful. She adjusted the delicate seams with meticulous care, then rose to her full height, her gaze finding mine again in the reflection. There, she said, the single word carrying a quiet, profound satisfaction. Perfect. The word drifted down over me like the softest, warmest blanket, comforting and yet utterly terrifying in its weight. Perfect. I had never once permitted that word to live anywhere near my own name, and now it hung in the air between us as though it had always belonged there. Slowly I stood from the vanity stool. The skirt brushed lightly against my knees with every small movement. I turned completely to face Clara. For the first time I truly noticed the calm that surrounded her, the serene certainty that this entire transformation had been something she had anticipated from the very beginning. "You see it now, don't you?" she asked, her voice barely above a breath. "This isn't a joke. This is you. Perhaps not every part of you, but certainly a part you've spent years too frightened to acknowledge." Her words struck me with the sudden force of wind through open windows. I wanted to push them away, to insist this was only temporary, merely an amusing afternoon diversion, nothing more. But the truth was already beating beneath my skin with every rapid heartbeat. I felt lighter than I had in years, freer, more whole, even as the realization terrified me precisely because it felt so undeniable. Clara stepped closer still, her voice dropping to the softest murmur. "Don't fight it," she said. "Just let yourself be. There is nothing wrong with discovering who you truly are." A dozen urgent questions spun wildly through my mind. Why was Clara doing this? How could she possibly understand me more clearly than I understood myself? And what would become of me when I eventually walked out of this house and returned to a world that had never glimpsed this hidden dimension of who I was? Yet even as those fears surged, threatening to drown me, I could not ignore the quiet electricity that raced through my veins. I felt vividly, startlingly alive in a way I hadn't experienced in far too long. Clara must have sensed the tempest raging inside me, because she placed one gentle hand on my shoulder. "Let's make some tea," she said softly. "You need a moment just to breathe." The simple suggestion anchored me, gently drawing me back from the brink of panic. I followed her into the kitchen, every step accompanied by the hushed, rhythmic swish of the skirt, a secret melody that belonged only to me. Each motion served as a tender reminder of the change that had taken place, and with every reminder came an unexpected, undeniable joy. As the kettle began to sing and pale steam rose in delicate spirals, Clara leaned back against the counter in her usual relaxed way. After a thoughtful pause, she spoke again. "You know," she said quietly, "when I first discovered that uniform, my mind went straight to you." I looked at her, startled. "Not because I wanted to tease you," she continued, "but because I sensed something, a small, bright spark. I wanted to offer you the chance to explore it." "You sensed something?" I asked, voice catching. Clara nodded, her expression tender yet utterly certain. "Sometimes we carry pieces of ourselves so carefully concealed that even we forget they exist. But I see you. And I believe you're finally ready to see yourself too." Her words settled over me like a long-awaited truth finally given voice. Perhaps she was right. Perhaps this went far beyond a costume. Perhaps it was an invitation. An open door leading toward discovery, toward honesty, toward a kind of freedom I had never allowed myself to imagine. I lifted the warm cup to my lips, the heat steadying my still trembling fingers. And for the very first time I permitted myself to wonder what might lie ahead. The tea spread warmth through my chest, but it did little to quiet the whirlwind of thoughts still spinning behind my eyes. Clara remained leaning against the counter, watching me with that steady, patient kindness, as though she already understood something I was only beginning to grasp. With each slow sip another layer of fear seemed to dissolve, until at last the question I'd been holding inside slipped free. "Why me?" I asked, the words scarcely louder than a breath. "Why did you think this was something I would want?" Clara tilted her head, eyes soft with compassion. "Because I've watched the way you move through the world. You notice beauty in the smallest details, textures, colors, tiny overlooked things. And because I've always sensed a quiet sadness in you, as though you were keeping something locked away deep inside. I didn't know precisely what it was, but I felt certain that offering you a safe place to explore might help you find it. Her explanation pierced me with a sudden aching recognition that reached far beyond fabric or cosmetics. For years I had constructed careful walls, convincing myself that certain thoughts, certain curiosities, simply did not exist. Now those walls were crumbling, and in the space they left behind stood a truth I could no longer pretend away. Clara must have felt my quiet turmoil, because she reached across the counter and laid her hand lightly over mine. "You don't need every answer tonight," she said gently. "All you need is to be honest with yourself." We finished our tea in a peaceful silence broken only by the occasional soft rustle of fabric as I shifted in the maid's uniform. When Clara spoke again, her voice carried the calm assurance of someone who had already walked this path. "Would you like to try something?" she asked. "Something that might help you feel more fully inside the role." My heart gave a sudden hard thud. "What do you mean?" Her smile curved just a little wider. "Let's do a few simple chores. Nothing strenuous, just a handful of tasks while you remain in character. I think you'll be surprised by how natural it begins to feel." Every instinct urged me to refuse, yet the suggestion awakened a deep, unexpected curiosity. I nodded slowly. Clara's eyes lit with quiet delight. She led me back to the living room and placed a feather duster in my hand. "Start with the shelves," she instructed softly. "Move slowly. Let yourself really feel each motion." My first few strokes were awkward, hands trembling as I tried to remember how to simply breathe. But gradually, almost imperceptibly, a strange rhythm began to emerge. The gentle sway of the skirt with every step, the faint whisper of silk stockings brushing together, the smooth glide of feathers across wood, it all wove together into something almost hypnotic. For the first time, I was no longer consumed with how strange I must appear. I was simply moving, existing, finding an unexpected sense of purpose in this new space. Clara observed in silence, offering only the occasional gentle word of encouragement. "That's perfect," she said at one point. "See how graceful you become when you stop struggling against yourself." The praise sent a flush of warmth through my entire body. Graceful. I had never once applied that word to myself, yet in that moment it felt entirely true. When the shelves were finished, she handed me a small tray holding a teapot and 2 delicate cups. "Bring this to the table," she said softly. I obeyed without a second thought, moving with careful attention, acutely aware of how the skirt flowed around me like a living reminder of everything that had changed. When the tasks were complete, Clara invited me to sit beside her. "How did that feel?" she asked. I searched for words, finding them only after a long moment. "Strange," I admitted, "but peaceful. Like I wasn't pretending anymore." Clara's smile grew deeper, softer. "That's because you weren't. This isn't a performance. It's you finally allowing a part of yourself that's been hidden far too long to come into the light." Her words unlocked something inside me. Memories surfaced. Childhood moments when I had been quietly drawn to certain fabrics, colors, movements that had always been labeled forbidden. I had buried those feelings beneath layers of fear, yet they had never truly vanished. Clara wasn't inventing anything new. She was simply creating space for something long suppressed to finally breathe. As afternoon light slowly melted into the tender colors of evening, Clara rose and smoothed her own skirt with a graceful motion. "I think you're ready for one more step," she said. My heart leapt. "What step?" She studied me carefully before answering. "Every maid needs a name, not just a uniform. Something that belongs to this version of you." The idea startled me. A name. Something separate yet intimately connected. A way to honor this side of myself without shame. I looked down at my hands, catching the faint sparkle of makeup in the dying light, and felt fear and anticipation twist together inside my chest. "I don't know," I whispered. Clara knelt before me, her gaze warm and unwavering. "You don't have to choose tonight," she said gently. "But when you're ready, selecting a name can be the very first act of accepting that this part of you is real." The suggestion settled over me like the softest invitation. A name, a self, something far greater than a passing experiment. I wasn't prepared to speak it aloud, not yet, but somewhere deep within, a quiet possibility began to form. For the first time, I experienced the thrilling, terrifying certainty that this was no longer merely play. It was the beginning of a journey I could neither foresee nor refuse. Night gradually gathered at the windows, softening the outlines of the room until the outside world seemed to fade away completely. The last traces of daylight caught the glossy surface of the apron and the delicate shimmer on my cheeks, turning my reflection into something almost otherworldly. Clara switched on a small lamp beside the sofa, filling the space with a warm, protective glow. She settled across from me, posture easy yet fully present, like a guide patiently waiting for the next part of the path to appear. "You're very quiet," she observed gently. "What's moving through your mind?" I hesitated, unsure I could unravel the tangle of emotions inside me. "It's strange," I said at last. "I feel calm, as though I've been carrying something impossibly heavy for years and only now set it down. But I'm also afraid. I don't know what this means, for me, for my life." Clara nodded slowly, never breaking eye contact. "It means you're human," she said softly. "It means you're finally acknowledging parts of yourself that deserve to be seen. That isn't something to fear. It's something to honor." Her words washed over me like a slow, gentle tide, though the fear itself remained, lingering quietly at the edges. "What if people find out?" I whispered. "What if they don't understand?" Clara leaned forward, expression calm and certain. "The world will always have opinions. But this moment isn't about the world. It's about you. The people who truly love you will value your happiness far more than their own expectations. And those who cannot, they were never really yours to keep." Her quiet conviction steadied something inside me. I realized that, perhaps for the first time in years, I was no longer simply reacting to life. I was choosing to explore, to feel, to exist beyond the narrow boundaries I had once accepted as permanent. Clara seemed to sense the subtle shift because her smile deepened, a soft pride shining through. "Would you like to continue?" she asked gently. "There's no hurry. We can stop whenever you wish." I shook my head almost before she finished speaking. "No," I said. "I want to keep going." Her eyes brightened with understanding. "Then let's give this version of you a name," she said. "It doesn't need to be forever. Just something to help you connect more deeply with this part of yourself." I looked down, fingertips tracing the fine lace trim along the apron as names drifted through my thoughts, each one carrying its own delicate weight. Finally, one rose to the surface, simple and strangely inevitable. "Lena," I whispered. "I don't know why, but it feels right." Clara's face bloomed with warmth. "Lena," she repeated softly, letting the name linger between us. "Beautiful. It suits you perfectly." Hearing it spoken aloud sent a shiver racing through me. It felt as though a long-sealed door had swung open, revealing a space I had always known was waiting, yet never dared to enter. Clara reached out and gently squeezed my hand. "Welcome, Lena," she said with the quiet reverence of someone witnessing something sacred. The sound of my new name wrapped around me like the gentlest embrace. For the first time in my life I felt whole. The rest of the evening unfolded slowly in small, tender moments. Clara patiently showed me how to walk with grace in the stockings, how to allow the skirt to flow naturally rather than fight against it. She adjusted the apron when it shifted, her touch light but certain. Each small correction felt less like instruction and more like affirmation, as though she were simply guiding me home to a truth she had always recognized. At first my movements were cautious, uncertain. Soon though my steps grew steadier, my posture taller. I was no longer performing. I was inhabiting this identity, allowing it to expand and breathe inside me. When Clara suggested we sit again, she placed a small hand mirror in my palm. "Look at yourself," she said softly. "Not only the clothes or the makeup. Look at the person wearing them." I lifted the mirror and met my own gaze. For a single suspended heartbeat, I barely recognized the reflection. Softer, yes, but also stronger. A quiet confidence lived there now, a spark of life that had been missing for far too long. "What do you see?" Clara asked. I swallowed hard. "I see me," I said at last. "Not the me I show everyone else. The me I've been hiding." Clara's smile deepened, her eyes shining with unspoken pride. "That's all I ever wanted for you," she said. "To see yourself without fear." Silence filled the room, but it was not empty. It brimmed with possibility, with gentle truths and promises yet to be spoken. I thought of the life waiting beyond these walls. The routines, the expectations, the roles I had once believed were unbreakable. They still existed, but they no longer felt like chains. They had become choices. Choices I could now approach on my own terms. Clara squeezed my hand once more, anchoring me in the present. You don't have to solve everything tonight, she said softly. This is only the beginning. But whatever direction you choose from here, remember this feeling. I held Clara's words close, letting them sink deep into the quiet spaces of my heart. Remember Lena. She's part of you now and she always will be. They arrived with the gentle weight of something finally true. I had no idea what the coming days would hold, but for the first time in as long as I could remember, fear did not rush in to fill the silence. Lena was no longer an experiment, no longer a fleeting shadow. He was real. He was me. And that reality, however layered, however complex, was mine forever, untouchable by anyone else. The next morning arrived softly. Sunlight slipped between the curtains and washed the bedroom in the palest gold. I opened my eyes to the familiar hush of fabric shifting against itself and the warm, rich scent of fresh coffee drifting in from the kitchen. For a long, suspended moment I simply lay there, letting the memories of the previous evening move through me like a slow, comforting current. Across the room, the maid's uniform hung carefully over the back of a chair. The black material caught the new light and seemed to breathe with quiet invitation. Looking at it now, I expected panic, a sharp stab of second-guessing. Instead I felt an unexpected blend of peace and gentle eagerness. The name Lena moved through my thoughts again. Not fragile any longer but steady like a second heartbeat that had always been there, waiting to be noticed. Clara appeared in the doorway, cradling 2 steaming mugs. When she saw where my gaze rested, her expression softened into a knowing smile. "Morning, Lena," she said, the name falling from her lips as naturally as though it had belonged to me my entire life. A delicate shiver traveled through me at the sound. "Good morning," I answered, the words leaving me almost before I realized I had spoken them, smooth and surprisingly easy. Clara's smile grew warmer, deeper. "Would you like to wear it again today?" she asked gently. "No pressure. Only if it feels right to you." I paused for the space of half a breath. "Yes," I said quietly. "I think I do." She placed 1 mug on the bedside table and moved to help me dress. Every gesture felt familiar now. The cool glide of stockings over skin, the soft whisper of the skirt settling into place, the careful knot of the apron strings at my waist. There was no tremor in my fingers this time, only a calm, almost surprised acceptance that my body had already begun to remember the sequence by heart. When she stepped back and finished smoothing the collar, Clara regarded me with quiet pride. "You look beautiful," she said, and the words carried absolute certainty. This time the compliment reached a different place inside me. It wasn't merely about how the clothes looked. It was about being witnessed, truly, honestly seen, in the exact shape of who I had finally allowed myself to become. After breakfast, Clara proposed something that made my pulse jump. "Let's step outside for a little while. Just a short walk." The thought of crossing the boundary of these safe walls while dressed this way sent a nervous thrill racing through me. "It doesn't have to be far," she said quickly, reading my expression. "Just the backyard. You deserve to feel the world around you like this, even if it's only for a few minutes." We stepped together onto the small patio behind the house. The morning air felt cool and alive, scented with dew and the sweet breath of opening flowers. A light breeze moved across the skirt and whispered against the stockings. Every sensation felt magnified, sharpened by the courage it took simply to stand there in the open daylight. It was such a small thing, yet it carried the weight of ceremony, the quiet, private first steps into an entirely new way of being. Clara remained beside me, steady and grounding. "How does it feel?" she asked. I closed my eyes, drew in the crisp air and let the answer rise without force. "Free," I whispered. "Like I'm finally allowed to exist." Clara reached for my hand and gave it a gentle squeeze. "That's all I ever wanted for you," she said simply. "Freedom." The rest of the morning passed between the patio and the garden. We trimmed spent blooms, swept scattered leaves, moved slowly through tasks that now carried their own soft grace. The last traces of fear gradually dissolved. I no longer glanced nervously toward the fence, no longer imagined eyes watching from beyond it. The world outside those boundaries felt suddenly far away, almost beside the point compared to the quiet certainty that was unfolding inside me. This had never really been about the uniform. It was about stepping fully, without apology, into a part of myself I had spent years refusing to acknowledge. Later, back indoors, Clara guided me once more to the vanity. She refreshed the light makeup with careful, tender touches, adding only the faintest hint of color to my lips. As I watched her in the mirror, a deep, wordless gratitude rose in my chest. She had given me far more than clothing or a name. She had given me permission, to see, to feel, to become. "Thank you," I said softly when she stepped back. Clara met my eyes in the reflection. "You don't need to thank me," she replied gently. "This was always inside you. I only helped you look." The day continued in a calm, peaceful tide. We shared stories over lunch, laughter coming easily now. The old tension that had once lingered between us had melted away, replaced by something quieter, warmer, true companionship. Every time Clara said my name, Lena, it settled more deeply, less like something borrowed and more like something that had always been waiting to be claimed. As evening drew near, a bittersweet ache bloomed inside me. Soon I would have to step back into the world outside, into routines and roles that had no space for the person I had become. Clara sensed the shift in me. "You don't have to leave Lena behind," she said softly. "Even when you return to your everyday life, she remains part of you. You can visit her whenever you need to. And if you ever want to talk or explore more, you know exactly where to find me." Her words wrapped around me like quiet liberation. Lena did not have to stay locked inside these walls. She could live inside me, carried gently but without shame, into whatever life waited beyond this house. As the sun dipped low and filled the room with amber and rose, I looked at Clara and felt gratitude deeper than language could hold. She had seen me long before I could see myself. She had guided me with endless patience, never pushing, only ever inviting. Because of her, I had not only found Lena. I had found courage. The final days of this journey bore little resemblance to what I had imagined when it all began. What had once felt like discipline imposed from outside had quietly transformed into something comforting, almost sacred. My reflection no longer startled me. My skin felt softer, my posture more naturally upright, my voice gentler without effort. Weeks spent surrounded by lace, silk, and delicate fabrics had changed me in ways far beyond the surface. The deepest transformation had nothing to do with appearance. It lived in the way I carried myself now. The quiet, unshakable confidence born from meeting each new challenge and choosing again and again to remain. Claire noticed before I did. One morning, as I polished the last pieces of silver in the cabinet, she leaned in the doorway, arms folded, eyes narrowed thoughtfully, a faint smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "You know," she said slowly, "you're not the same person who first walked through that door. You've learned discipline. You've learned patience. And you've discovered a part of yourself you never allowed yourself to meet before." I tried to speak, but emotion closed my throat. He was right. Somewhere between the careful strokes of mascara and the countless hours spent learning to move with grace instead of force, I had uncovered a strength I never knew lived inside me. The final moment arrived on a rainy Sunday evening. Clara handed me a simple black dress and told me I would serve dinner to a small circle of her dearest friends. My heart hammered at the thought of being seen by strangers, but retreat was no longer possible. I dressed with deliberate care, every motion measured, every breath steady. When I entered the dining room carrying the tray, their eyes widened, not with mockery but with something closer to quiet wonder. One guest murmured almost to herself, "Graceful." The word bloomed inside me, warm and bright, more powerful than any praise my old life had ever offered. After the guests departed, Clara poured 2 glasses of wine and sat across from me at the table. "You did beautifully," she said, her voice soft now, stripped of the crisp authority she had once carried. "You've proven everything there was to prove." At last I asked the question that had lived silently inside me since the beginning. "Why me? Why this?" She tilted her head, gaze calm and unwavering. "Because I saw someone trapped behind walls of expectation. I wanted to offer you a space where you could meet yourself without judgment. The uniform, the tasks, the lessons, they were only ever tools. The real change was always waiting inside you." Her words settled over me like the gentlest covering. This had never been about shame or control. It had always been about freedom, about dismantling the rigid lines I had drawn around myself and daring to step beyond them. I understood then that the person who had first crossed Clara's threshold would never return. Not because of the clothing but because of the courage I had found while wearing it. When I finally left her home days later, the rain had lifted. The sky stretched wide and clear, brushed with pale gold. I carried no uniform, no accessories. only the quiet, unshakable certainty that I had discovered something essential about who I was. The world beyond the door had not changed. But I had. Grace, patience, self-acceptance. They traveled with me now, woven into every step of whatever life came next. Looking back, I see clearly why this story matters. It is not really about being a maid. It is not even about clothing or appearance. It is about the way a single act of daring can peel back the layers we hide beneath. Sometimes transformation arrives through challenge. Sometimes it arrives through the patient presence of someone who sees us more clearly than we see ourselves. But always, it requires the courage to step into a role we once believed we could never inhabit. And once we do, there is no true returning. Because the truth of who we are shines far brighter than the fear that once kept us hidden.